Good afternoon, my fellow South Africans. We are back with more news. Please remember to like and subscribe to assist my channel growth so I am able to continue giving you the latest updates. Thank you and enjoy the watch.
I just want to touch, with your indulgence, Chair. I give advice in the following ways in the city. An HOD would call me. An HOD would approach me, even in other meetings. An HOD would come to my office and they would ask me, and I said, all I did was guide the HOD. I'll guide the HOD to say, can you look at this? I've looked at the stuff, let's look at that, add this, and so on. If there's a formal request for an opinion, I decide now, do we do it internally, because then I refer it to the divisional heads, or do I go externally and appoint counsel or attorneys for that? So this is one of the matters where Erasmus came to me. I looked at documents. Chief of Police came to me on the 21st. I looked and I guided Chief. But in the way I guided Chief, I do not know whether he understood that perhaps it's going to implicate him in the way I was asking the questions. And then decides, we're not going to take it further. Because that last engagement I had was on the 22nd or the 21st with Chief, and thereafter the letter came in. And I had nothing further about that until 2 years later, when this issue came up before General Mkhwanazi.
Just clarification. You say you don't know whether the chief realized when he came to you that it was going to implicate him. Well, can you just expand on that?
Yes, thank you.
How is he implicated? Because it's not clear from a statement what you're talking about.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. So, Commissioner, when I discussed the matter with both Henny Erasmus and the chief, and I looked at the chief and I said to him, Chief, the issue with Brigadier Mkhwanazi seems to stem from a relationship developed at the State of the City address, or even before. At the State of the City address, in the documents that you provided, there was an operational plan, Chief. Your signature is there. But, Chief, in his way, he listened to me. He listened. But he would not say one way or the other to say, I'm responding this way. So I said to him, Chief, firstly, the State of the City address involved, from what I understood in his own report, he found that there were people who were not supposed to be there, were from companies who were not on our appointed list of security companies. He found dangerous situations there because there were snipers in that environment. Who then would have briefed the Mayor, Tanya Campbell, who was our first citizen? We had members of the public on the day being there, because the soca is one of the most important events in a city.
Can I just interrupt you? My question was just to understand, implicate him in what way, before you moved on too much.
Implicating him to the extent that he has not applied the due diligence that he ought to have done to protect the citizens, to protect the first citizens, and in terms of that. Because that is where the implication is.
Thank you.
And then furthermore, Chair, the engagements with Chief and Erasmus were about, let's look at your witnesses that you have. The one witness being Christine, who talks about I think he referred to him to the blue lights. So, Chair, I'm still on now dealing with the allegations from page 13 onwards. Dealing with the allegations of Christine and the blue lights, and also the transfer of those vehicles, the donations. Chair, that donations was totally contrary, non-compliant with our system of delegations. I think that has been canvassed here, and I will support that. But what was critical in terms of what, and I asked Chief, but Stein says that were you in EMPD and the Fleet Department, which was a leg of transport, were you bypassing this matter all the time? Because Stein refers to other such instances when there was, even from provincial government, when there were donations done by way of a letter. And Stein, who was a proxy in the matter, deals with all issues, clearly stated that Mkhwanazi came to him, he had the vehicles to donate. And then I said to Chief, but that is why it's going to go back to where? Who was involved? When did Mkhwanazi meet with get VIP services, and what were the engagements? And what were the involvements of the senior leadership in the EMPD? So apart from implicating the chief, it would implicate the divisional heads, or the deputy chiefs of police in critical matters where pertaining to the state of the city. What was the knowledge? What did you brief the mayor about? It cannot be that Brigadier Mkhwanazi would brief the mayor on critical issues. Why would he be doing that? Why would you have allowed that to have taken place? What is the issues of the driving? Who was driving the vehicles on that day? So all of these issues, as it became it seemed to be me probing, but it was about, Chief, do you understand that it'll come back to you in terms of what you knew? How do you understand what you should have done, what you ought to have done? The witnesses were basically Stein, and it was Gwabe. Gwabe was a divisional head who received apparently a donation of 300,000 for books. And then I said to the Chief, but if you look at Gwabe's report, and if you look at Stein's report, they speak about the resources that were required. Even if you correlate that back to what Ocker Besaidenote mentioned, for essential police officers, for the vehicles, patrol vehicles, there were none. The bullets, there were none. Bulletproof vests, there were, well, I can't say none, but I mean, it was depleted resources. The college from Gwabe, there was the college, and what would the impact be if you could not get the 300,000 to pay? Chair, again, the process is totally incorrect. But the fact is, Chief, did you know about this lack of resources? And did you deal with finance? Because when did you approach finance for these resources? Because patrol vehicles are very important in protecting 4 million residents, not to even speak about the other residents or people that transit the area. But these are some of the discussions we've had here. So both Chief of Police and Mr. Erasmus could not give me the issues, because if I looked at it and applied my mind, I'm saying that if Gwabe is called as a witness and he says this, it means he was the one who did not follow. He ought to have said to Brigadier Mkhwanazi, but why are you bringing this? This is wrong. Go back to the Chief of Police, do a proper process, send it to legal for vetting, and let it go to the city manager. Same with the vehicles. Even the MMC, Masuku, came about and she raised concerns to say, but why? How can we not have vehicles? The police officers are going to the patrol sites with the private vehicles. What if there's a shooting? What if there's this? So these issues were raised by the MMC even prior to that. So those are some of the issues I captured. And then Stein's one for me was very glaring in terms of, Stein also said a separate statement where he says that there was no blue lights. There was no blue lights fitted on the vehicles. Now, I do know that the vehicles were transferred to the city of Ekurhuleni. I think it was for a day or two until Brigadier Spies raised certain concerns and overturned that. But there was a transfer for a minimal period. So the cost there, which I later saw, was about 200 Rand per vehicle to transfer the vehicles. But the entire process, if you go into the process of that, Chair, it's more than that. Transferring the vehicles is one thing, and showing the documents. You're not even showing for vehicles that are older than 3 years. Where's a certificate of acceptability or certificate of compliance? You know, your roadworthy certificates. Where are these documents? Because if you go into an open environment, Chair, and where there's a shop steward or attendants on the other sides, these will be issues that I think. So are we not putting ourselves at risk in terms of we're going ahead with it? We're not investigating the other role players. Even the chief, your statement about what you knew of that. I saw a letter where you say, I think it was Chair, and I'll be corrected. There was a letter dated the 31st of March 2023, 2022. That was after the state of the city. Sorry, state of the city was 22. The next day, after the chief observed all of these issues, he wrote a letter, I think, to Mzolo. Mzolo was the direct in charge of Brigadier Mkhwanazi. And I could not see anything to say, but Mzolo, I want a full meeting. I want to know what is happening here, because the State of City address, you can't ask somebody for a written response. There should have been an engagement and to say, bring all the parties together. I want to know, because what would have happened had one of those snipers killed one of the people attending there? And we know now from the evidence here, Ekurhuleni is becoming a place of peace, but unfortunately, what is happening in Ekurhuleni is not. So these are some of my concerns that I've raised here, because then I will have a separate claim to deal with if somebody was killed, even if the executive mayor was killed. So, and my concern was, but did you only rely on a operational plan, which has now been stated to be said it was forged, but when the other engagements from at least 2 weeks, a month before, 2 weeks before, a week before, and daily before the SOCA, that I would think is when you're applying your full powers. So hence, Commissioner Baloyi, sorry, in that long-winded thing, but to show that it was not a matter of just saying, Brigadier did this, he donated vehicles, he brought donations in, he put in blue lights. This was, for me, look at the full landscape of what we're dealing with. We're dealing with serious implications from CAT VIP services, from Medicare 24, and how they even got, even COVID-19. If they were involved in COVID-19, there was a program run by HR. Because in terms of the staff letters that go off, those were all dealt with between HR and the department involved. So, Chair, I just want to move on then for the purpose of, but I think we've got the crux of what I'm trying to achieve. Gwabe as well didn't take the responsibility he should have on page 14, paragraph 58, Chair. He ought to have sent it back to Brigadier and said, no, follow the process. But apparently those cadets would not have qualified. It would have caused a different problem if that happened. So, Chair, on page 15, page 68, with that, I totally reject the fact that I pressured him to hand over the docket and stopped all processes. The next time the docket was referred to was when there was a BXBX mail, a Bixi email, and then the forensic investigators got involved. I raised that because I am the Deputy Information Officer in terms of POPIA. And if there was credibility, bring forward, even if it's to council, send it through. But when you start to do that, and if later on, if time permits, or as I'm permitted, Chair, we can go into the details of the BXBX email. But what I did was raise my concerns as a Deputy Information Officer to the Office of City Manager. She called in the Chief Audit Executive at that stage, and then they proceeded further with the appointment of that.